Picture two men we'll call Derek and Marcus. They graduated from the same state university in 2010 with identical engineering degrees. They landed jobs at rival firms in the same city, earning salaries within $5,000 of each other. Today both are 37 years old. Both are married. Both have children. From a distance, their lives appear to be carbon copies of one another, except for one detail. Derek drives a 2024 Ford F-150 Lariat with a monthly payment of $1,000. Marcus drives a 2020 Toyota Camry that he bought used 3 years ago and finished paying off last spring. Derek has $14,000 sitting in his 401k. Marcus has $340,000 in his. Same income, same starting point, different vehicle choice. That's the whole story in miniature. My name is Root, and today we're going to dissect what I call the new car penalty. This isn't just about the sticker price gap between new and used vehicles. We're going to cover the entire system, the financing math, the depreciation cliff, and the tactics dealerships use. We're also covering the quiet decision most people make in their 20s that ends up determining whether they retire at 60 or grind on until 72. By the time we're finished, you'll understand exactly how Derek ended up where he is, and more importantly, how you can avoid the same fate. Let's rewind for a moment, because understanding where we are now requires understanding where we started. Back in 1995, the average new car in America cost roughly $20,000. By 2010, that figure had climbed to about $29,000. Then, in September of 2025, the average new car price crossed $50,000 for the first time in history. $50,000 for an average car, not a luxury model, not a fully loaded truck, just the average. By December of 2025, that average had risen further still, to $50,326. The average full-size pickup truck, meanwhile, sold for $66,386. That's not a car payment anymore. That's a mortgage with cup holders. Now compare that to the used market. The average used car listing in 2025 sat around $25,700. A 3-year-old used vehicle averaged $30,699. So we're looking at roughly a $20,000 gap between a new vehicle and a lightly used one. $20,000 isn't a rounding error. That's a down payment on a starter home. That's a substantial emergency fund. That's 2 years of community college tuition for a kid. And here's the part that should raise your eyebrows: loan terms have stretched at the exact same pace as prices. Remember when a car loan lasted 3 years, maybe 4 if you really pushed it? Those days are as extinct as the flip phone. Today, the average new car loan runs 69 months. 1 in 5 new car buyers is now signing an 84-month loan, 7 years of payments for a loan product that didn't even exist before 2008. The industry invented 7-year loans because nobody could afford 5-year loans anymore, then invented 8-year loans because nobody could afford the 7-year ones either. This isn't really a market at this point. It's a treadmill. Here's data straight from Experian, which tracks nearly every auto loan originated in the country. The average new car loan in late 2025 was $43,582, financed over 69 months at an interest rate of 6.37%, producing a monthly payment of $767. The average used car loan was $27,500, financed over 67 months at 11.26%, producing a monthly payment of $537. Wait, 11% interest on a used car loan? Yes. This is the part nobody mentions when they tell you to simply buy used. Banks charge a premium on used car loans because the collateral is older, and they're nervous about resale value if the borrower defaults. So you save money on the sticker price and then pay some of it right back in interest. It feels unfair, and in a sense, it is. Now you might be wondering, if used car loans carry nearly double the interest rate, doesn't that undercut the whole used car argument? It doesn't, because you're financing a much smaller amount to begin with. 11% of $27,000 is still less total interest than 6% of $43,000 over a comparable period. The used car buyer still comes out ahead, just not by quite as much as some finance influencers would have you believe. The actual monthly payment gap between the average new car buyer and the average used car buyer comes out to $230. That's the new car penalty in its most basic form. $230 a month might sound small. Hold on to that number, because we're going to come back to it, and when we do, it gets ugly. Here's where things start to look genuinely strange. According to Edmunds, in the fourth quarter of 2025, 20.3% of all new car buyers committed to a monthly payment of $1,000 or more. 1 in 5. A record. And these aren't exotic sports car buyers either. These are ordinary people buying ordinary SUVs and mid-size trucks, your coworker with the Tahoe, the neighbor with the silver pickup, the woman in HR who just leased a new Mercedes. How do they end up there? The same way, every time. They walk in saying, "I can afford $400 a month." The finance manager nods agreeably, then quietly stretches the loan term from 60 months to 72, then to 84, and in an increasingly common scenario, all the way to 96 months. That's an 8-year car loan for a vehicle that won't survive 8 years without needing a transmission rebuild. The finance manager is effectively helping someone sign up to make payments on a vehicle that will be mechanically dead long before the loan is paid off. It's the financial equivalent of leasing a snowman. In the fourth quarter of 2025, 20.8% of all new car loans ran 84 months or longer. That means more than 1 in 5 new car buyers committed to 7+ years of payments, purely so the monthly number wouldn't look insane on paper. They walk out of the dealership thinking they won the negotiation. They didn't. They just signed up for a longer sentence for the same crime. Now we arrive at the part of the math the auto industry never volunteers: depreciation, which is just a polite financial term for what's actually happening, which is your car quietly losing value while you continue making payments on it. I call this the depreciation cliff, because it isn't a gentle downward slope. It's a vertical drop in the first year, followed by a slower decline afterward. The moment a new car is driven off the lot, it loses roughly 20% of its value instantly. 20%, just from the act of driving it home. The license plates aren't even bolted on yet, and a meaningful chunk of the down payment has already evaporated. Over 5 years, the average new car loses about 42% of its original value, according to a 2026 study from IC Cars. So if someone bought a $50,000 car, 5 years later it's worth roughly $29,000. Some vehicles are dramatically worse. The Nissan Leaf loses about 63% of its value over 5 years. The Jaguar I-Pace loses more than 72%. The BMW 7 Series loses around 67%. These aren't really cars at that point. They're financial paper shredders you happen to commute in. And here's the part nobody wants to admit out loud: electric vehicles, broadly speaking, are currently the worst depreciators on the market. 5-year EV depreciation averages 57%. So when a friend insists he bought a new EV because it'll save him money, gently remind him that he's about to take a $60,000 haircut in exchange for saving $1,500 a year on gasoline. The math doesn't favor him. On the flip side, certain models barely depreciate at all. The Toyota Tacoma loses only about 34% over 5 years. The Porsche 911, the Honda Civic, and the Chevrolet Corvette also hold their value unusually well. There's a small handful of models where buying new is actually defensible from a pure numbers standpoint. But for the average buyer purchasing the average car, depreciation alone costs $4,000 to $5,000 a year. That's more money than most people contribute to their retirement accounts annually. People are quite literally burning retirement savings to keep that new car smell. Here's a statistic that should genuinely keep you up at night. In the fourth quarter of 2025, 29.3% of trade-ins applied toward new vehicle purchases carried negative equity. Nearly 3 out of every 10 people trading in a car owed more on it than the car was actually worth. The average amount they were underwater by was $7,214, an all-time record. And what does the typical person in that situation do? They roll that negative equity straight into the new loan. 27% of underwater trade-ins are now upside down by more than $10,000. Some buyers walk into a dealership, finance a new vehicle, and start the loan already $15,000 in the hole on a car they no longer even own. Then they sign an 84-month loan on top of it. 3 years later, when they're ready for something new, they trade that one in two, except now they're underwater again, so they roll another $7,000 into the next loan. I call this the negative equity flywheel. Dealerships will tell you it's perfectly normal. Finance managers will smile and assure you that everyone does it. What's actually happening is that millions of people are simultaneously paying off cars they no longer own while borrowing fresh money for cars that are losing value faster than they can pay them down. It's a self-perpetuating debt machine, and the faster it spins, the deeper people sink. It's essentially running on a treadmill that's been dropped into quicksand. The entire system depends on nobody noticing, because the moment people realize they're underwater, the whole model falls apart. So the industry has trained buyers to fixate on the monthly payment, that shiny round number on the page, rather than the loan amortization schedule, which would reveal how little of each payment actually reduces the principal versus how much vanishes into interest. That's not an accident. That's the design. But here's the part of the new car penalty that dwarfs all the math we've covered so far: bigger than depreciation, bigger than interest, bigger than insurance. Most people don't actually buy cars for transportation. They buy them for identity. And the industry knows this better than anyone. That commercial showing a rugged truck climbing a mountainside isn't really selling four-wheel drive. It's selling the fantasy that the buyer is the kind of person who climbs mountains, even though the most rugged terrain he's encountered all year is the grass lot at a kid's birthday party. That luxury sedan commercial showing an executive pulling up to a cliffside estate isn't selling a car either. It's selling the illusion that buying the car will somehow make the buyer that executive. It won't. It'll just enroll him in a payment plan toward resembling one. People defend their car payments with the same emotional ferocity they'd use to defend their own family. Suggest to a coworker that he could have bought a used Camry instead of a brand new F-150, and watch what happens. He won't engage with the math. He'll get defensive about his identity, because in his mind the truck isn't a depreciating asset, it's a statement about who he is, about what he's earned, about not being the kind of guy who settles for a lesser vehicle. The auto industry has spent decades and billions of dollars engineering exactly that emotional response. They've mapped the F-150 buyer's average age, income bracket, political leanings, taste in music, preferred beer, and even his deepest insecurities about masculinity, then built an entire marketing machine to exploit every bit of it. By the time he sits down at the dealership, he isn't really making a purchase decision anymore. He's claiming tribal membership, and he's signing up to pay for it with 72 months of his income. Now, I can already hear the objections, so let's address the big three before moving on, because if I skip them, half the audience will spend the rest of this video convinced I'm wrong. Objection 1: I need a reliable car for work, and used cars break down. This is beautifully, demonstrably wrong. AAA's 2025 driving cost study found that average annual maintenance for a new car runs about $1,300. For a well-chosen 3 to 5-year-old used car, that figure runs between $600 and $1,200. So even at the high end, the difference is maybe $100 a year. That's not constant breakdowns, that's the cost of a single tank of gas. The myth of the unreliable used car is mostly spread by people who profit when buyers choose new instead. Objection 2: used cars don't come with warranties. Most actually do. Certified pre-owned vehicles typically come with manufacturer-backed warranties extending 2 to 4 additional years. And here's an interesting wrinkle: extended warranties on new cars are one of the highest margin products a dealership sells. Which means buyers who purchase a new car along with an extended warranty are essentially paying for coverage that most used car buyers already get bundled in for free. Objection 3: I qualified for the loan, so clearly I can afford it. This might be the single most expensive sentence in personal finance. Qualifying for a loan and actually being able to afford it are two completely different things. The bank's only real question is whether the borrower will keep making payments until the loan is satisfied. They don't care if someone eats ramen for 7 years to make that happen. They don't care if retirement contributions get skipped or if a kid's college fund disappears. All they care about is whether the debt-to-income ratio looks acceptable on paper. Qualifying for a car loan is the financial equivalent of being allowed to walk into a casino. It doesn't mean stepping inside is a good idea. Quick aside while we're on this topic, I run a community where I teach people exactly how to research, write, and produce videos like this one, faceless YouTube channels, long-form personal finance scripting, the entire system from start to finish. There's a link in the description if you're curious. Now, back to the carnage. Let's actually run the numbers, not as a spreadsheet, but as a story. Remember Derek and Marcus from the introduction? Let me walk you through exactly how their two lives diverged. Back in 2012, both men were 24 years old, 2 years into their first engineering jobs, each earning roughly $65,000 a year. Both needed vehicles. Derek walked into a Ford dealership and financed a brand new F-150 XLT for $42,000 on a 72-month loan at 6.5%, producing a monthly payment of $710. Marcus walked into a used car lot and bought a 4-year-old Toyota Camry for $16,000 on a 60-month loan at 7%, producing a monthly payment of $317. The difference between them, $393 a month. Derek finished paying off the F-150 in 2018, at which point it was worth roughly $20,000. He traded it in, rolled $3,000 of negative equity into a brand new F-150 Lariat, and took out a 72-month loan at 7% on a $54,000 truck, with a monthly payment of $920. By 2024, he traded that one in as well, rolling $6,000 of negative equity into yet another new Lariat, this time on an 84-month loan, with a monthly payment of $1,040. Marcus, meanwhile, finished paying off his Camry in 2017 and kept driving it for 5 more years, spending roughly $800 a year on maintenance. He sold it in 2022 for $4,200 and combined that cash with his savings to buy a 4-year-old Honda Accord for $19,000. He's still driving that Accord today. It was paid off in 2026, and he hasn't made a car payment in over 4 years. Here's where it gets genuinely interesting. Marcus didn't just save the difference between the two payments, he invested it. $393 a month went automatically into a low-cost index fund for 12 straight years, then roughly $700 a month for the past 4 years once his car was fully paid off, all while Derek's payments kept climbing. Assuming a 7% real return, by 2026 Marcus has roughly $147,000 sitting in that single investment account. Add in the retirement contributions he was able to make because he wasn't drowning in car payments, and his total invested net worth comes to about $340,000. Derek, on the other hand, owns a truck currently worth maybe $38,000, while still owing $42,000 on it. He has $14,000 in his 401k, because every spare dollar went toward payments, insurance, fuel, and the occasional repair that Ford somehow didn't cover. He's driving a genuinely beautiful Lariat. He also cannot retire. Statistically, he'll still be working at age 67. Marcus, meanwhile, is on track to retire at 54. Same job, same income, same starting point. One repeated choice. That's the new car penalty, not the difference between two vehicles, but the difference between two entire lives. I'm not going to sit here and pretend new cars never make financial sense. They sometimes do, just far less often than the industry would have you believe. First, genuine 0% financing. When manufacturers offer real 0 APR deals on slow-moving inventory, the math can actually favor buying new. But only about 3% of new car loans in 2025 carried a true 0% rate, 3 buyers out of every 100. The rest of us are paying 6, 7, or 8%. Second, depreciation-resistant models. Vehicles like the Toyota Tacoma, the 4Runner, the Porsche 911, and the Jeep Wrangler hold their value so well in the used market that buying new can sometimes be cheaper than buying a 3-year-old used example. It's rare, but it does happen. Third, legitimate business use paired with Section 179 deductions. If a vehicle genuinely functions as a business asset and the mileage can be documented, the tax math shifts considerably. Talk to an accountant about this, not a stranger on TikTok. Fourth, the 15-plus year keeper. If someone genuinely intends to drive a car until it falls apart, depreciation matters less over that kind of timeline. Buy something reliable, maintain it religiously, never trade it in, and the math improves the longer the ownership period stretches. Fifth, if someone has a fully funded emergency fund, no other debt, is maxing out retirement contributions, and the payment represents a tiny fraction of their income, then sure, buy the new car. They've earned it. The problem was never new cars existing. The problem is people buying new cars who probably shouldn't be financing any vehicle at all right now. Before we wrap up, let's pull back one final curtain. When loan paperwork gets signed, it usually happens in what's called the F&I office, short for finance and insurance. It's its own department, with its own manager and its own profit targets. According to a Q3 2025 industry report, the average dealership earns about $2,534 in pure profit per vehicle purely from the F&I office, profit stacked entirely on top of the profit from selling the car itself. Where does that money come from? The buyer. It comes from upsold extended warranties. It comes from gap insurance sold for $700 when a regular insurance company would charge $30. It comes from wheel and tire protection plans, paint protection packages, and all the small add-ons slipped quietly into the paperwork while the buyer is tired, hungry, and just wants to drive home. The single biggest source of F&I profit, though, isn't the add-ons at all. It's the interest rate markup. Here's how that works. The bank approves the buyer at, say, 6%, and the dealer is permitted to mark that rate up by 1 to 2 percentage points and pocket the difference. According to an NBR working paper examining auto lending practices, roughly 78% of auto loans get marked up this way, with an average markup of 1 full percentage point. On a $44,000 loan spread over 69 months, a 1-point markup costs the buyer roughly $1,400 in extra interest, money that flows directly into the dealership's pocket for nothing more than typing a different number into a computer. There's also the Foursquare worksheet, where the trade-in value, down payment, monthly payment, and loan term all get juggled simultaneously to confuse buyers into not noticing that the price went up while the payment appeared to go down. And there's the trade-in shell game, where a dealer overpays for the old vehicle on paper while quietly raising the price of the new one to match. The single most valuable move available to any buyer is getting pre-approved through their own bank or credit union before ever stepping onto a dealership lot. Walking in with a real, locked-in rate means the dealer can try to beat it, but they can no longer mark it up. That alone can save the price of a decent used motorcycle for about 10 minutes of effort. Look, nobody's suggesting everyone should drive around in a rusted-out compact with mismatched hubcaps. That's not the point of any of this. The point is understanding the system being walked into the moment someone sits down across from a finance manager staring at a circled number on a page. The auto industry has spent decades engineering that exact moment to extract maximum value while making the buyer feel like they're winning. Stretched loan terms, rolled over negative equity, marked up interest rates, identity-driven marketing, and a pile of add-on products, none of it is really about selling a car. It's about selling a 15-year revenue stream that happens to come with cup holders. Buying a smart, lightly used vehicle isn't a sacrifice, it's a strategy. It's choosing to pay the wealth building tax instead of the dealership tax. It's choosing to drive a perfectly fine 3-year-old Toyota while quietly investing the difference toward a future where work becomes optional. It isn't glamorous. Nobody's going to compliment a boring sedan at a stoplight. But 20 years from now, when friends are still writing car payment checks and someone else isn't, that someone will be the one with the quiet smile. Here's the line worth carrying away from all of this, because it's the entire argument in a single sentence: the car you drive isn't the cost, the car you don't buy is the wealth. Every dollar that doesn't go into a depreciating asset becomes a dollar that compounds for the next 30 years. Derek bought a truck. Marcus bought time. That's the choice. It's always been the choice. If this was valuable, the link to the community is in the description below. And to be clear, I'm not a financial advisor, this content is for educational purposes only, and the decisions from here are yours alone to make. Drive safe, run the numbers, and I'll see you in the next one.